On this episode of Locked On Grizzlies, the Grizzlies found a way to knock off the Golden State Warriors. Yes, those Golden State Warriors with Steph Curry, a returning Draymond Green, Klay Thompson was on the court, Andrew Wiggins was there, and yet the Grizzlies, without Desmond Bane, without Ja Morant, behind efforts from Vince Williams Jr. and G.G. Jackson, find a way to pick up the win. What's realistic for this team moving forward? And also shouting out the Memphis Hustle and the development of the Grizzlies organization. All that and more. Stick with us and stick around. Lock in on this episode of Locked On Grizzlies.
You are Locked On Grizzlies, your daily Memphis Grizzlies podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hopefully for you and yours, it is a toasty Tuesday on this episode of Locked On Grizzlies. Very cold around various parts of the country, especially, of course, in Memphis, Tennessee. Lots of snow and ice made the attendance for the Martin Luther King Jr. game a little bit sparse, kind of like the hair on my head. But Damichael Cole was in the crowd covering, as he always does, for the Commercial Appeal there in Memphis, Tennessee. Memphis Grizzlies beat writer Damichael, my co-host, of course, on this podcast known as Locked On Grizzlies. I am Joe Mullinax. We'll be talking that big win, how the Memphis Hustle, the G League affiliate of the Memphis Grizzlies, has a lot to do with that victory, and what is realistic to expect from these guys moving forward now that we know that Desmond Bane is out for the foreseeable future. Because we recorded our episode for Monday, and then literally 30 minutes later, the news comes out about Bane. So we haven't talked about that yet. We will talk about that and then some on this edition of Locked On Grizzlies. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 of bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. We are free and available wherever you get podcasts. As proud members of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team each and every day. Check us out on YouTube, wherever you get podcasts. Like, comment, rate, review, subscribe. We are less than 100 followers away or subscribers away from 3,000 on YouTube. So spread the word, shout us out, help us get across that threshold. I would certainly appreciate it, as would my co-host, Damichael Cole of the Commercial Appeal. Damichael, I hope that you're nice and warm after a chilly and icy night out there in Memphis to watch the Grizzlies knock off the Golden State Warriors on Martin Luther King Jr. Day.
Yeah, I'm warm. I made it home safely and got straight in my room. I had the heat turned up a little bit, and the Grizzlies turned up the heat, right? It really turned up the heat in this game. How about that performance? And
I tell you what.
And I think, Joe, we'll talk about it as the show goes on, but this group of Grizzlies players, they're developing a theme. I'm starting to figure out how they play together. It's a little different than what we're used to seeing. You're not seeing as many flashy alley-oops and things like that, but they're starting to develop some type of identity. And, I mean, a lot of people did not see that coming, what we saw. G.G. Jackson, as you mentioned, Vince Williams, Jacob Gilliard. The bench totaled 57 points from the Grizzlies.
Phenomenal.
How many times have we been complaining about the lack of production from the bench when the team felt top heavy, when it was Ja, Jaren, Dez scoring, half of the team or sometimes even more than half of the team's points. So this was a balanced win. You had, I think, seven total guys in double figures, 3 starters, and 4 guys off the bench were in double figures. So a balanced win for the Grizzlies. Watching Vince Williams guard Steph Curry, that was fun. I enjoyed that matchup. And you kind of spoiled Draymond Green's return game. It was a big game for the Warriors because they were getting the band back together, and the Grizzlies just nipped all that in the bud real quick.
Maybe a reminder that the band shouldn't get back together. Maybe the band will be breaking up here soon, at least if you're the Ringo that is Andrew Wiggins, dating myself with a Beatles reference there. The fact that you mentioned the balanced scoring in the Warriors game, I just want to point out Xavier Tillman in 30 minutes of play only scored 2 points.
Yep.
Now, he was a plus 13, one of the best plus minuses, single game plus minus, flawed stat, but he was one of the better plus minus players in the game. So obviously he contributed in other ways. But still, it's pretty remarkable that he was able to do what he did only 4 total rebounds, didn't score more than 2 points. Obviously, his defense
man.
And who he was playing next to helped a lot. But Zaire Williams only scored 4 points. So that balance really shines through even more when you consider that the Grizzlies had 2 starters that shot a combined 2 for 12 from the field. Jaren Jackson Jr. also did not have his best shooting game. 4 for 20, 3 for 14 from beyond the arc. Still scored 18 points because he got to the free throw line pretty consistently. But this was a game for guys like Vince Williams Jr., who maybe he'll be the best value contract in the NBA sooner rather than later. 24 points, 7 rebounds, 4 assists. He's doing things that we didn't fully expect him to do. We would have been totally cool with him just being a 3-and-D type of wing.
He's taking it to another level, Joe.
He's increasing. He's turning up the volume, turning up the energy, and that's been a lot of fun to watch. And then, of course, the talk of Grizzlies X or Twitter, whatever you want to call it, is GG Jackson. You mentioned how the bench was extremely impressive, but GG Jackson led the charge 23 points. And our old friend, Sean Coleman, former host of this podcast, he posted on X that there are 3 guys in the history of the NBA, I believe, that have scored 20 points in back-to-back games. Kevin Durant, that are 20 years old or younger. Kevin Durant.
19.
19. Thank you for correcting me. 19 years old. Kevin Durant, LeBron James, and now GG Jackson. Now, obviously, we'll talk about it.
And only LeBron was younger than GG Jackson when he did it.
So I don't know that we expect GG Jackson to be LeBron James and Kevin Durant, but I do think that between the 45th or 47th pick in the second round, whatever it was for Vince Williams Jr., and in that second round selection, the 2022 NBA draft, the fact that GG Jackson, I think, was 45th, that might have been where I mixed it up. And, 2-way contracts to start the season, to be the lead guys in a press conference after a national television game. Not the way that we saw this season going, but at least for one night, it looks pretty good to have those 2 guys leading the charge for Memphis.
Yeah, and it gives you something to look forward to. Like, we've talked about this a lot, and it's exciting because it's 2 guys that have stacked performances on top of each other. GG Jackson, as you mentioned, back-to-back 20-plus point performances. Now, they're going to look different. GG Jackson's probably not going to have too many more games that he makes like 5 3-pointers like that. He'll do it again probably because he's extremely talented offensively. But the point is that he can do it in different ways. Like, he may score 20 in another game, but it might just make 1 3-pointer. And it might just be more rim attacks and mid-range jumpers and things like that. Like, the guy has a nice offensive skill set. Going back to Vince Williams, you pointed it out, but I think we're starting to get to see an expanded game. And quite frankly, just to be honest with you, I don't think that he's really great at it yet. Like, there's some struggles there, and there's some limitation to his playmaking skill set. But the Grizzlies putting him in this situation, it's allowing him to grow. Remember Desmond Bane? Who would have thought that he'd be a 25-5 guy his rookie year when he was taking mostly spot-up 3-pointers, right? So you're watching Vince Williams kind of blossom into, as you said, more than a 3-and-D guy. I looked at it, Joe, and now in 3 of the last 4 games, he's had at least 4 assists. In his previous 26 games before that, you know how many times he had 4 assists? Just 1.
Yeah, I was going to be like, yes, 1.
26 games before that. This is when he was playing off of the guys, Desmond Bane, Jaren Jackson Jr., Jaffa a little bit there. 1 game of 4 more assists. In 3 of the last 4 games, he's had an 8-assist game, he's had a 6-assist game. Now he has a 4-assist game in that stretch. It's because Vince Williams is getting more playmaking opportunities. We're focusing on those guys, of course, because Vince Williams, he just got upgraded from 2-way contract. I don't think it'll be to any surprise to anyone to say that soon GG Jackson will be the next Grizzly who potentially gets assembly. And it could be. We'll see what happens with Jacob Gilyard as well, because he's approaching the 50-game mark. And he had 2. I want to point him out, too, because he had 2 big steals in that fourth quarter. He robbed Steph Curry. He pickpocketed Steph Curry, and the Grizzlies went the other way. Both led to points, terrific scoring opportunities for him as well. Knocked down some big 3-pointers. This was just a complete youth movement type win for the Grizzlies. And again, Luke Kennard knocked down some big shots. Jaren Jackson Jr. didn't have the most efficient night, but defensively, 4 steals for him. I think he had a block as well. And all in all, terrific all around performance. Like it was gritty, Joe. Like they didn't shoot 50% from the field and anything like that. It was 13 steals and 10 blocks by the Grizzlies. It was just all the hustle plays were made.
And G.G. Jackson had 4 stocks on top of his impressive offensive performance. Again, if you had told me before this game that Jaren Jackson Jr. would shoot 4 for 20, 3 for 14 from beyond the arc, and the Grizzlies would win, I would have called you a liar. And yet here we are, a big victory over the Golden State Warriors at home. It's nice to see FedEx Forum rocking a little bit again. It's been a tough year, going all the way back to last March, right? It's been a tough 10 months or so for the Memphis Grizzlies and their fans, but a big, big opportunity. Whenever you beat the Golden State Warriors, it's a positive feeling, at least here on Locked On Grizzlies, I can tell you that. So the reason that the Grizzlies won, again, not because of Jaren Jackson Jr., Desmond Bane, John Morant, both out due to injury for the foreseeable future, Morant for the rest of the season. How did the Grizzlies get it done? Development. And we're going to shout out Jason March, the head coach of the Memphis Hustle, and the organizational structure of the Grizzlies as a whole in terms of development. Next, here on Locked On Grizzlies. But first, this episode of Locked On Grizzlies is brought to you by BetterHelp. It is a new year, right? And obviously here in 2024, people talk a lot about new year, new you, but maybe you're already doing really well, right? Maybe you have a really solid thing going in your life and you're just trying to find ways to maybe improve yourself, or there's a certain section of you that you would like to see continue to get stronger and grow. Therapy can help you find those strengths so you can ditch extreme resolutions and make changes that actually stick. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It is entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Fill out a brief questionnaire, get matched with a licensed therapist. You can switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. Celebrate yourself in 2024 and the progress that you have made. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp.com, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA. This episode of Locked On Grizzlies also brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. The NFL regular season is wrapped up. The playoffs are grinding forth. I know Damichael Cole is excited about his Packers heading out to San Francisco this coming weekend. There's still time to get in on the action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, as the playoffs grind forward. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's $150 in bonus bets, win or lose. Their app is so easy to use, and there are so many different ways to play and bet. Live same-game parlays, finding bets in the new Explore tab, making a parlay in the Parlay Hub. That's the best way to find popular parlays that other players are doing, and so much more. What are you waiting for? The playoffs are approaching, the divisional round. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn. Make your first bet a layup with FanDuel, an official partner of the NFL. Damichael, obviously we continue on talking about how this team has won these games, right? In this particular game against the Golden State Warriors, obviously they lost a couple before. The Desmond Bane injury happened this past weekend, and we'll talk more about expectations for the team moving forward, coming off of that tough news. But in the here and now, we mentioned it a moment ago, want to shout out Jason March. And if you don't know who Jason March is, I have known Jason March for a while. I know Damichael Cole knows Coach March. Yeah. And I say I know Coach March. I had him on a podcast a long time ago. He might vaguely remember my name. But I respect Coach March a good bit. He is the head coach for the Memphis Hustle, and he has been, over the last couple of seasons, a significant part of the development of guys like a Kenneth Lofton Jr., who's no longer on the team, of a Vince Williams Jr., who's been on that two-way contract, or was on that two-way contract, playing a lot of basketball down in South Haven. Obviously, G.G. Jackson, a common refrain on social media, Damichael, was G.G. should have been playing the whole time. This is evidence that he should have been getting reps from the very beginning on this team. No. I know you remember this, and I remember it too, partner. He is a completely different player right now than he was in Summer League. Okay? Completely different guy. He looks much more comfortable, much more confident. And a major reason for that is the organizational structure of the Memphis Grizzlies, how they experiment with the Memphis Hustle, but they also implement scheme. Players get introduced to it. They develop skills there. The strength of this franchise has been, for the last several years, development of talent. You mentioned Desmond Bain growing as a player earlier. Santi Aldama is a great example of that as well. Vince Williams Jr. and Gigi Jackson are just the two latest examples, but they're also two guys most recently who got a significant amount of run with that Memphis Hustle organization down in South Haven.
Yeah, Taylor Jenkins went out of his way, in his presser. He said, shout out. This is a he shouted out the hustle. He said this is a Grizzlies win, and this is also a big win for the Memphis Hustle. If you're unfamiliar with how this developmental system works, this is my best way of giving you the breakdown of how this. Because at the end of the day, let's get a little bit deeper into the numbers. 9 Grizzlies played yesterday. 7 of those players have played extended time with the Memphis Hustle. 7 of the players. And 6 of them in the last 2 seasons. Santi Aldama, his rookie year, spent a lot of time with the Hustle. But the only 2 guys who aren't really Hustle guys that played in that game is Jaren Jackson Jr., also known as an NBA All-Star and a former top 5 pick, and Luke Kennard, who was a veteran player in the NBA, who's led the NBA in three-point percentage the last couple of seasons and was traded here, in last February at the trade deadline. Those are the only 2 players who don't have extended playing time with the Memphis Hustle. Everyone else on this team has been down there in South Haven and went through that developmental system. So the way that it works is those coaches are basically the extended version of the Grizzlies. You might say, duh, but at the same time, not every G League program is orchestrated that way.
Correct.
I've been around a bunch of different, G League coaches and things like that. And in certain situations, everywhere, I guess, development is a priority. But the schemes and things like that are different in certain places. The Grizzlies, the Hustle, play a very similar style of play as the Grizzlies. Jason Morris, as you mentioned, he is a big reason, a big part of that. He's in communication with Taylor Jenkins all the time. They have these things called reports where Marsh and the assistant coaches with the Hustle give these reports on those players, on Gigi Jackson when he's playing down there, on Kenneth Lofton Jr., as you mentioned, when he was down there, or Xavier Tillman Sr., Santi Aldama, Zaire Williams, David Roddy, Jake LaRavia, the list goes on. They get these reports, and the Grizzlies take these into consideration. They're looking at them. All of them are based on stylistic preferences that the Grizzlies like their players to play, and all of those type of things. And not only do they get those reports, those assistant coaches, because Marsh personally, someone being around the Grizzlies, I don't see him as much with the Grizzlies, but his assistant coaches, I see them a lot with the Grizzlies. They're the ones. I know a lot of people don't like to hear this word because you start to roll your eyes a little bit, but the play groups, right? When we hear Taylor Jenkins talk about the play groups, those assistant coaches, because most of them are young, they are more the ones who are active in the play groups, because in the play groups, you're not going to go 5-10 Grizzlies players playing most of the time. Especially on an injury-riddled team like this. You're going to have probably 4 or 5 guys playing, and then you're going to have assistant coaches and other staff and personnel, intertwining with that. And a lot of those are assistant coaches on the Hustle. So these are guys who are around these players a lot, and they're basically very, very, very committed to the idea of having these guys develop in a similar system with the Grizzly system. So when they come up, there's very little changes being made other than just personnel. The things that are emphasized are pretty similar. So the Grizzlies have something good going there. That's why guys have come up in the past. I mean, John Conchar is another example. A lot of guys have come up from the Hustle and kind of thrived. And it's setting up, for Gigi Jackson to do the same. We've seen Vince Williams do it. Even Jacob Gilliard, in his situation, being a point guard, coming up and playing, with the Hustle, going to the Grizzlies, and it's very little changes systematically. And that's kind of allowed these young guys to come here and there not be too much of a learning curve. Like, it is a natural learning curve because of the talent level, but systematically, there isn't that much of a learning curve.
The easiest comparison is minor league baseball, right? Like, you have the Memphis Red Bulls.
Perfect comparison. Perfect comparison.
I would say it's close to perfect. To me, the perfect comparison is minor league hockey. Okay. And I'm not saying that anybody watching or listening to this show is going to be an expert on the Hershey Bears of minor league hockey.
This is where I go to sleep.
Yeah. If you mesh the two, if you combine minor league baseball and minor league hockey, I think it makes it perfect, because the hockey is where the system is the same. Right? Like, I'm a big hockey fan of the Washington Capitals, and they have the Hershey Bears. And in Hershey, in Pennsylvania, where their minor league affiliate is, those guys run a similar system, a similar scheme, so that when they come up to the big club, They understand what's going on already. And again, the speed of the game is different. The caliber of player is different, but they are prepared, at least in terms of understanding terminology and what to do. Baseball, I think the comparison is a little bit better in terms of competition, right? You work up from AA to AAA to the majors, those sorts of things. Like when I watch Gigi Jackson play, that stands out to me. Like a major reason that a very talented player clearly is better now than he was 6 months ago is because he wasn't thrown into the majors right away. It's like a top prospect starting in AA, right? And he works his way up, and now maybe he's ready for the majors. It's like a September call-up in baseball, right?
Yeah.
So the Grizzlies, to your point, Damichael, are really maybe not the only NBA team. I'm not an expert on everybody's G League affiliate, but they are one of the teams that is the best at this, because as bad as the Grizzlies have been this season, they were the number 2 seed the last 2 seasons. And obviously John Morant matters with that, Jaren Jackson Jr., Desmond Bane, but the role players around them and the fact that Santi Aldama has gotten better, all those names that you listed that have been hustle players in the past, they were major cogs of those playoff runs these last couple of seasons. And Vince Williams Jr. and Gigi Jackson are just the latest examples of that. So shout out to Jason March and the Memphis Hustle. A very impressive job. And I know, as you mentioned, Coach Jenkins did that as well. Well deserved for those guys. But we have to be realistic moving forward, right? Because as cool as it was to beat the Warriors, and don't get me wrong, it was super cool, big fan, this team is still very limited in terms of what they're going to be able to do moving beyond this game and into the rest of their schedule, especially without Desmond Bane over the next couple of months, more than likely. So what are some realistic expectations for the roster moving in to the remainder of the majority of the season? We'll talk about that next here on Locked On Grizzlies. But first, I want to shout out Locked On Sports Today, the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. It is here covering the top sports stories of the day with local experts like Damichael and myself of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube. Subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. This episode of Locked On Grizzlies is brought to you by Jase Medical. We come here to escape. Life can be hard. Sports are a wonderful way to forget about that for a little while. I get it. But for a minute, we got to talk about preparations for real life. According to the FDA, pharmacies are running out of antibiotics like amoxicillin right in the middle of a terrible time of year to get sick. All sorts of bugs flying around in terms of illnesses. This is scary stuff. I can't imagine a person that I care about, like Damichael or one of my family members, somebody along those lines, getting sick while there's a supply chain issue. They can't get the medication that they need. Jase Medical helps take care of that. The Jase case is a pack of 5 different antibiotics treating a long list of bacterial illnesses like UTIs, respiratory infections. This stuff can happen to any of us at any time. Be prepared. Visit jasemedical.com and complete your physician encounter. You'll be reviewed by a board-certified physician, and your medications will be dispensed by a licensed pharmacy at a fraction of the regular cost. Be prepared right now. It's never been more important than today. Go to jasemedical.com and use the code LOCKEDON to get $20 off of your order. When we come back here on Locked On Grizzlies, closing out this Tuesday edition of the show, talking about realistic expectations for the remainder of this season. Stick with us. Welcome back to Locked On Grizzlies. I am Joe Mullinax, one of your hosts, joined by my co-host, Damichael Cole, the commercial appeal there in Memphis, Tennessee, Memphis Grizzlies beat writer for that publication. He was in the house on Monday evening watching the Grizzlies knock off the Golden State Warriors. And as I mentioned throughout the show, it's wonderful to beat the Golden State Warriors, right? Mm-hmm. We talked about how Gigi Jackson looks really impressive and Vince Williams Jr. expanding his game. We shouted out the Memphis Hustle and how awesome it's been to see.
Even the injured players feel like that, Joe.
Yeah.
John Morant said on the bench, he told Gigi Jackson that this is one that he really wants to win. So it's even them.
One of the few rivalries the Grizzlies have, right? Maybe Draymond Green will call it a rivalry now. In Memphis, Golden State's definitely a rivalry, and the Grizzlies knocked off the Warriors. Always fun. But you look at the standings, you look at the roster, you understand, because, again, we recorded our Monday show, and then 30 minutes later, the news came out about Desmond Bane being out at least the next 6 weeks, right? Similar to Marcus Smart, like a reevaluation in 6 weeks kind of situation. Hanging out on crutches and a boot and those sorts of things.
Yeah.
What is realistic for this team? Because they play a fun style. You mentioned that earlier in the show. It's cool to watch these guys develop. And for me, Damichael, That is my expectation. I want to see continued development, continued growth. If Vince Williams Jr. and G.G. Jackson and Jaren Jackson Jr., as long as he's healthy, if these guys are the same players in April when the regular season ends, that they are now, the season is a failure. Because of all the context of the injuries that they had to endure, not handling the Ja Morant suspension as well as they probably should have, to me, that's the greatest failure of the season. Yeah. Now, with all of the injuries that have mounted, you understand where the Grizzlies are, for me at least. I want to see continued development and growth and improvement upon individual players within certain skill sets that we can talk more about over the next couple of episodes. What are you looking for in terms of expectations? Do you want to, what's more important to you? Maybe is a good way to phrase it. Obviously, we all want to win, but you have to look at this roster and understand there's going to be nights that the Grizzlies are simply going to be outmatched.
Yeah. And let me add on to that, and basically say this. Yeah. Personally, I don't care what their win and loss record is, at the end of this. It really, in my mind, it doesn't matter that much. Now, if they're making a push for the play-in and whatnot, then yeah, go for it. You'll potentially, get some guys back for the last couple weeks of the season and go for it if that's the case. But do I think that'll be the case in the crowded Western Conference where this Utah team looks better now than they were earlier in the season? So that's
Colin Sexton has been a revelation for that Utah Jazz team.
That's another one that you have to factor in. So it just even looks even more unlikely because that was a team that you for sure had to pass, when we were talking about it early in the season. But with all that being said, here's my thing. I really don't care about wins or loss at this point because at the end of the day, the draft pick talk doesn't move the needle for me. If you look at this draft class, anywhere from 5 to 10, there's not much separation right now in those prospects. 5, outside of the very top of the draft class, at least right now. Now, granted, that could change, but based on what we're saying right now, that doesn't move the needle for me. Personally, and I think Joe kind of agrees to a certain degree, I don't even think they should keep the draft pick unless
absolutely not. We can talk more about that later this week. I'll come up with 10 trades to get rid of that.
Exactly. So, it's not really a huge priority to say, because I don't think they should quote unquote tank either. Because I think it's big for this team to build these winning habits and continue to, throw the players out there like Jaren Jackson Jr. I know some people say, sit Jaren a couple games and whatnot. No. Some of these guys need to learn how to play alongside of Jaren because guess what? Vince Williams isn't going to be in the lineup with Jacob Gilyard, Zaire Williams, and those guys next season. You're going to be playing alongside of Jaren Jackson Jr., Desmond Bane, Ja Morant, Steven Adams, and you want to build up a rapport of chemistry with as many of those guys as you can. So I want to see, as you said, development is the biggest key. You need certain young players to separate themselves from the pack. Right now, especially when you get to that Roddy, LaRavia, Zaire Williams grouping, there's not much separation there. You need someone to separate themselves from that pack, like we're seeing Vince Williams, right? Vince Williams has kind of separated himself. G.G. Jackson is still way too soon, but we know the talent. We know the talent. I'm not arguing that. I've been one of the main advocates of the talent of G.G. Jackson since he was drafted by the Grizzlies. So I think the development, you are right on point, Joe. That is the biggest thing you want to see from the Grizzlies going forward. How that development takes place is very crucial. I think, some people have pointed out that, Desmond Bane might as well be done for the season because he's out at least 6 weeks. I know in some cases we've seen grade 3 ankle sprains are longer than 6 weeks. So he's probably going to miss 7 to 8 weeks. So you're talking about if he comes back potentially early to mid-March. At that point, the Grizzlies will be, at the final stretch of the season. Some people say, well, just sit him. At that point, you're probably out of the race. I say no. If he's able to play, Desmond, trust me, I've been around Desmond Bane long enough. If he's able to play, he's going to want to play. And again, you want Vince Williams to be on the floor with him. You want G.G. Jackson to be on the floor with him and Jaren Jackson Jr. So I'm anti this whole tank thing, where you set your veterans down and they're not playing because of some soreness or they're resting and all that. No, if they can play, throw them out there. Let these young guys who are going to be able to play with them next season get that opportunity because that's how you build this thing up. Development, I'm with you, Joe. That's the key word. That's what the Grizzlies need more than anything going forward. Win-loss record, I really don't care.
This draft class, as of right now, is so weak that multiple scout draftniks have said, and maybe we can get somebody on over the next several weeks here to talk about this.
Sure.
G.G. Jackson would probably be a lottery pick in this draft. That's how young he is. That's important to remember. He's 19 years old. And it's also important to understand that this Grizzlies team expects to compete next year. Now, the opposite side of that coin is obviously if you have the number 6 pick in this draft and it's a weak draft, other teams are going to know that too. How much value are you going to get for that pick? Probably enough to complete the consolidation trade that this team desperately needs, right? Yeah. I think that's an important piece to point out here. I am excited to watch these guys play. And I think that is the best compliment that I can pay them, because they are in a position where, as we talked about last week, tanking doesn't make sense because of all the teams in front of them that are going to keep competing, including the Utah Jazz. I'm glad you mentioned how well they're playing. The Jazz may not actively try to win, but they might win in spite of themselves. And again, like we talked about, coaches and players are going to keep trying to win. Front offices may not necessarily do that, but players and coaches don't care about draft picks. They want to win all the games they can. I think that the Grizzlies are fortunate that they can keep playing and competing, and it will kind of take care of themselves, and they're in a win-win spot. It's all icing on the cake at this stage. If they lose, it improves their lottery standing. If they win, they make a push for the play-in without Ja Morant and Desmond Bane, and your roster is a lot better than you thought it was when the season started. So that's a positive of this situation. It kind of feels like a foregone conclusion, but we'll probably have games like this one every once in a while, the Warriors game where the Grizzlies come out, maybe they expose weaknesses in an opponent. Obviously this isn't Locked On Warriors. To me, that game said a heck of a lot more about Golden State and how that team is very broken, because the Grizzlies are literally broken. Wiggins, Curry, Thompson, and Green all played for Golden State on Monday night. And the Memphis Grizzlies, with a poor shooting Jaren Jackson Jr., were able to beat Golden State. That says a lot about where Golden State is.
It's ugly over there.
Where the Grizzlies are, we're going to keep learning over the next few months without any real expectations. And to be honest, that's where sometimes the best growth and learning happens. So it's going to be fun to watch as long as they keep playing this way. There's going to be ebbs and flows, but as long as the effort and the attitude maintain, this is going to be a fun team to watch moving forward. Thank you for joining us here on Locked On Grizzlies. Hopefully you're going to go check out Locked On NBA next. And you can also subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel, Locked On Sports Today, 24/7 covering the top sports stories of the day with local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows like Locked On NBA that cover every league. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube, subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. Make sure you're liking, commenting, reviewing, subscribing on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts to Locked On Grizzlies. Damichael and I greatly appreciate it. We mentioned earlier in the show, inching closer and closer to 3,000 subscribers on YouTube, building the program. Thank you guys that are everydayers with us each and every time an episode drops. Damichael, I know you appreciate it, as do I. The next time we're together, it will be the Wednesday edition of the show. And maybe we dive deeper into G.G. Jackson's game, the way that he's developed since Summer League. Maybe we take a closer look at ways that he can improve and other young Grizzlies, what the kinds of things we want to see as the season unfolds, Damichael.
Yeah, sounds good. I mean, that's the theme for the rest of the season. It's development. It's watching these young players grow into their roles. And maybe, the Grizzlies now, we said we were going to talk about Desmond Bane. We didn't talk about much about Desmond Bane today, but there was a question in the YouTube comments, and people have asked me around the Grizzlies as well. I think we really need to talk about this hardship exception situation. Because now with Desmond Bane's long-term injury, with Jake LaRavia's injury situation, that kind of opens the door for some new opportunities, and we can kind of brainstorm some things there, Joe. I know you like to brainstorm some stuff. So
I love brainstorming. Yeah. Well, over the next couple of days, there's no games for the Grizzlies, but there's going to be plenty of content between Damichael and myself here on Locked On Grizzlies. Hope you'll be with us. For Damichael Cole, I'm Joe Mullinax. Thank you for being here with us on Locked On Grizzlies. Stay warm wherever you are. Hopefully you're safe and you're having a great day. We'll talk to you soon. Stay locked.